right, welcome back everyone to the 10 Chapters Apart podcast. I am your host, Steven, my co-host, Jason, and today we have another very special guest with you, our good friend from University of Oregon. Shekinah is with us today. Shekinah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, yeah. Good to finally be on the podcast with you guys.
Cool. Do you want to kind of introduce yourself for the people watching?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Shekinah Ocampo. I'm a sophomore at U of O, and I'm currently a psych major with a pre-nursing focus.
Nice. And then maybe do you want to share a little bit about your spiritual background, or how did you grow up in the church? What was the background for you?
Yeah. Basically, I was born and raised in a Christian home. My parents were raised Catholic, but they raised both me and my brother as Christians. So I kind of grew up doing the whole Sunday school thing, going to church and all that. So yeah, I basically grew up knowing about God my whole life and kind of learned more on my own, obviously with the help of the Holy Spirit, to learn more about why I believed what I believed. So that was kind of around middle school time, oh, okay, that's why I believe what I believe. And yeah, I've just been growing in my faith ever since. Joined Epic my first year at U of O, and yeah, just been growing in community and in the Word.
So you said you grew up in a Catholic background, but then so is your family still Catholic right now, or?
My parents were yeah, but they didn't raise me and my brother as Catholic, but we do have a lot of Catholic relatives still.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I would still say, yeah, I'm mainly Protestant, I guess, influence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you wanted to talk, or we wanted to come on, and you said that you wanted to talk about mental health today and some of the topics related to that in Christianity. So is there anything in particular that you wanted to talk, or something that we should get started on?
Yeah, I think obviously I'm a psych major, so mental health and all that stuff is pretty important to me. But yeah, I think just mental and emotional health in general isn't really talked about as much in the Christian faith, or there's obviously we live in a society where it's still kind of stigmatized in that way in comparison to physical health. So I think, yeah, just realizing the importance of that aspect in our walk with God, and realizing that there is a place for us to invite the Spirit in with our emotions and thoughts, because obviously everything in this broken world is not going to be fixed until Jesus comes back. And I think a lot of that does include mental health and illnesses and stuff. But yeah, I can share a bit, I guess, more of my testimony.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Basically, I kind of already mentioned how I came to faith with being raised in the church and everything. But yeah, I'd say in middle school, during that time when I was still also trying to figure out salvation and why I believed what I believed, I was going through some really tough times with anxiety and just feeling a lot of guilt and stuff. And I never was really diagnosed with any disorder, but I think something I've learned is that the absence of a mental disorder doesn't mean that you're mentally well either. So it's not black and white in that way. So I think just inviting Jesus even into those struggles, and realizing oh, God is bigger than my thoughts. His thoughts are bigger than our thoughts and our ways. I think that's played a big role in my testimony too, just letting God work in those things. And obviously it's still something I struggle with today. I don't think I'll completely solve all those problems until Jesus comes back. But yeah, I think just realizing more that it's oh, God does care about those things, me holistically as a person, not just the spiritual aspect of it, is something that I've learned to recognize a lot. But yeah, that's just a little bit of my background.
Was there a certain point in your walk where you had that one particular realization that Jesus can help you overcome these things?
Yeah, I think when it was really bad, I think really God was just my rock at that point. I probably could have benefited at least earlier on from therapy or counseling, but I think there was a point where I was I had to depend on God because that was all I had. And all those verses about us casting our anxiety on God and letting Him take all our burdens, everything. I think that I really emphasized those for myself during that time. But yeah, I think that was I don't know if it was a big life-changing turning point for me. But I think that's when I was like, okay, yeah, God is.
It's kind of like a slow, kind of gradual thing.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
I think it's really interesting that you bring this topic up, and especially I know you mentioned that like we definitely don't talk about it specifically in the church as much as we might talk about physical health, and I think it's also because like mental health is a pretty new topic, pretty recent, just in general in terms of health. I mean, I was talking to Jason just the other day about this. It just feels like we've seen the rise of mental health issues and also like care for mental health only within the past maybe 10, 20 years. And so I think it is important to recognize that it is a growing topic that we have to cover in the church. And it's interesting why it's exactly growing. And I don't know, we have some thoughts on it, but I was wondering if like, why do you think that like do you think that this is kind of a growing issue? Like what is kind of contributing to all of this? Do you think we're just like being more aware of it nowadays, or do you think that there are other things that are actually contributing to it?
Yeah, I think like as you said, kind of like society in general is becoming more aware of like, oh, there's like mental health problems too. It's not just like people being crazy or whatever. But I think in like the church too, there's always like that old kind of like situation where it's like, oh, you're like depressed or something, just like believe in God and like everything will be fine. So I think that has been something that like the church has like failed at least like early on with addressing. But I think now is that we're becoming more aware, we're like realizing that obviously like Jesus does have a place in those things, and as long as we're still in like our human bodies, we're still going to have like these human problems. So yeah, I guess I just think more people are being aware of it.
Have you ever like had any church address like mental health or any kinds of those issues that resonated with you, like you personally?
For me personally, I think like growing up in my home church here in Salem, so like middle school, high school kind of areas, I don't think it was really like addressed specifically in sermons, like other than like maybe like the verses that are like, oh, cast all your anxiety on him and like your thought life and stuff. But it was never really like, but like use like seek Christian counseling or like seek mentorship and stuff like that. That wasn't really kind of like offered as a solution. I think definitely more when I like went to college ministry, and obviously like Epic and this past Sprummer, the spring term retreat we have, just like learning more about how like mental health can be addressed from like a spiritual perspective, and not just like obviously you can still like use the word in the Bible, but like God did provide us with like people and services for us to benefit from. So I think, yeah, definitely later on is when I was like, oh, this is like more of a thing that's like being addressed in the Christian circles.
Do you think like because you said you haven't had that much experience in your churches in Salem, what are some of the things that you think that we can do more of in the church to kind of address mental health issues?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have all the answers, but I think.
Come on, Shekinah, like, what are you coming for? You don't have the answers.
Okay, let me leave the podcast real quick. Let me play the jazz music. Let me take a break. But
I mean, it's for both of you too. Like Jason, if you have any ideas.
No, Shekinah's the expert. I might chime in.
I mean, I think just like talking about it is like a good like open space for it, whether that's like in like small group or like community groups. I think just like when people are vulnerable about their own mental health struggles, that kind of like inspires vulnerability in others. I think like realizing that it's like not a taboo thing to talk about is like probably like one of the first and biggest step. And then from there on, like addressing how like Christians can specifically deal with those, I think would be helpful.
Can you unpack that a little bit when you say like how Christians can deal with these things? Like what does that mean to you?
I'm really just thinking of Carrie's seminar back in Sprummer, where she did like really emphasize like that there are like outside resources and services available, but also realizing that God like does truly value like our mental health as much as he cares about our physical, spiritual health. There's like a lot of obviously like verses in the Bible where Jesus is like very aware of those things, and he was very like he was still a human, so he was very emotional, and I'm like sure he did struggle with all like those harder, more negative feelings that we usually don't talk about. So even though they never say anything in the Bible like, oh, this person had like anxiety or depression or whatever, I think it's still very applicable today to how we can still address it. And obviously, like very cliche, but like ultimately, God like is the answer to our problems on this broken earth.
For sure. I was also thinking like, I think we haven't heard a lot of like sort of mental health topics addressed in sermons, at least in churches. But thinking about it, I don't know if that's really the place. So Shekinah, I'm glad that you brought up like kind of the more small group setting is a better place to address it, where believers can be more vulnerable with each other. It's kind of like a better setting. And another thing I've noticed is that like I definitely became more aware of mental health struggles, at least in the context of Christianity, when I joined Epic, just because like being in a college group, you're with these believers like so much, and you're like with them through all their struggles. So I definitely think like college, we're going to see that a lot, and small groups are a good place to address it. And I think one of the big things is like, yeah, again, echoing to kind of just vulnerability. And I think a lot of that actually rides on someone, if they're struggling, to be vulnerable with someone that they look up to as a mentor. And I know that can be hard. But I think if we do a good enough job of like creating safe, like trustworthy spaces for people to become vulnerable and share, like I think that can also provide a lot of healing if people are willing to take that risk.
Do you think you mentioned that mental health is kind of there's a stigma around in the church, and that's why it hasn't been mentioned so much, but do you think it's a more of like just general society problem that we don't talk about mental health, or do you think that there is maybe a problem that churches are having that makes it harder to address bring up in the church?
I think it can like be a combination of both, really, like just like how the way most people in like Western like society have been raised like with mental health, and how it was like stigmatized early on. But I think the church's like initial response is like it sounds like good on the surface level, just like go to the word, go in prayer, which are like super helpful things, obviously. But I think in doing so, it can kind of like diminish the impact that mental health struggles can have on Christians, and not like realizing like, oh, they do have like a significant like effect on how we think and how we feel. So I think both like societal influences and just like how the church has like kind of been used to like dealing with those problems, just like kind of sweep it under the rug and like just slap on a band-aid on it, you know, like a Bible verse or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. And so what do you think is maybe I guess it's hard to like, you don't want to just give them a Bible verse and say, okay, that's good. What's something that you can actually like do? I know that you mentioned like just being vulnerable in small groups, but if there's something that on top of that you would, I guess, recommend that churches, or just from your personal experience, how have you been able to find ways to deal with it, to kind of in your own like mental health struggle? Is there a way that you found like most effective that you think would be helpful to that churches or people in churches to do?
Yeah, I think like other than just like going to the word and encouraging prayer, I think just realizing that like most people in the church, like even if they are higher up, like haven't been like equipped to deal with specific like mental health illnesses or struggles. I think just like obviously not like forcing anything, but like opening up the idea of seeking like counseling or therapy, or recommending like book like Christian reads, I think can be very helpful. There's actually a book in our Epic that our crew intern, Esther Kang, kind of introduced, called Why Emotions Matter. It's kind of like a running, like one of the more popular things that are Epic, along with the Enneagram, I guess.
No, not the
I had to bring it up.
Enneagram.
I'm a 6
We lasted what, 15 minutes?
Yeah. Oh gosh, but yeah, I think that book actually, like, I also was thinking about that when I like signed up for the podcast, because it does go over from like a Christian perspective how emotions are like usually like brushed off, or we go from extremes of being like not wanting to deal with emotions in our spiritual walk to being controlled by our emotions. So I think just realizing the specific things that they're trying to tell us can be very helpful in like recognizing what God is trying to tell us too, because he like created us as humans with like souls and all these emotions. So obviously they have a purpose, and like we've seen like God's emotions of like wrath, jealousy, anger, sadness, and joy, even in our God and in Jesus in the Bible. So I think like just like books like that and becoming informed can also be super helpful with that.
I think when we talk about vulnerability, that's like step one. It doesn't like actually solve the issue. But Shekinah, you were mentioning Carrie, who led that seminar during our spring retreat for Epic. She actually leads a counseling program at our church. So I think like that's a really cool step that our church, Grant Avenue, has taken to like directly address, like people come to her with mental health problems, depression, anxiety, whatever it may be. And she actually has like a master's in counseling. So that's been awesome. And even like, I'm sure he'll be fine with me talking about him. But my roommate Thomas, I swear that guy like might not be a Christian without having gone to Carrie for those counseling services, because he came to a place in his faith last summer where he started to like doubt. I mean, even very basic gospel points. Like one of the most striking things to me was like doubting that prayer was even effective. So even these things so central. And by meeting with Carrie, he like was able to address the mental health side of it, but also throughout all that time, Carrie was able to like continually preach the gospel to him just through all those meetings. And then he actually got baptized like a couple of weeks ago. Actually for the second time. It was kind of like a rebaptism, but I think it's really cool like how it can like the mental health side can actually contribute to your faith. When that is better, your faith can actually thrive, I think, even better as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up. And I feel like, yeah, your guys' church is like very unique and like one of the few where there's actual like a mental health professional like very active in your guys' ministry too. I think that's really awesome. As I wanted to ask both you guys too, like with your experiences with like mental health and like the churches you grew up in, because I kind of shared a bit about like how I was introduced to it in the church, or like rather not introduced to it. But what's your guys' backgrounds with that?
Steven, you want to go first?
I was just gonna ask the same thing. Okay, sure. I think probably the background that I have is, yeah, like similarly, it's not really brought up specifically as a mental health issue, other than just like, oh, casting your cares, casting your anxiety on him, like cares for you, things like that, and just more in general terms. And a lot of time, yeah, there have been some times where I have been frustrated with maybe the way that church members have responded, with just giving a Bible verse and just saying to like pray and that it'll fix things, and it oftentimes feels like it won't, or that you pray and then like I don't know, that nothing really changes, that you still feel the same way. Growing up, yeah, so the churches that I went to were pretty much like that. Though I would say for the most part, like me individually, I don't feel like, maybe there were a couple of times, a period of a couple months in high school maybe, where I battled some depression, but I've never really stayed in a sort of like a hurting mental state for very long. For the most part, I've been able to kind of recognize that and just sort of push, like get through it type of thing. So I would say that I don't particularly have I guess expertise to talk about this issue, because I don't really know what it's like too much, since for the most part I've just like pushed through and kind of was very like focused and not had to deal with this too much. So that's kind of my background, and sometimes it does make it hard, I would say, for me to come alongside with someone who is battling with it, because it's hard for me to necessarily like empathize with them, even though like I try the best I can. And I guess I will also encourage people who are similar to me to like try the best that they can, even if it is hard for you to empathize with someone, or to truly know what they're going through, because that's kind of like my experience as well.
Yeah, I think similar to Steven, I have not really battled any like long-standing mental health issues, and that's definitely a blessing, because I know a lot of people who have, and so I think like I've definitely seen it all around me. Mostly, not really Christian friends, mostly non-Christian friends, but still like I've done a lot of like coming alongside, just like being a listening ear type of thing. And in church, honestly, like I didn't see it very much. I think this might be the kind of thing where you sweep it under the rug. Like you get out of the car on Sunday morning and you're like all chipper, and then you go home and you're sad again. I did know one family friend who had an eating disorder, but I think in general, most of the people we knew were supportive of her and like the recovery process, and all that. She spent quite a bit of time in a mental health institute, just trying to like get her body healthy again, trying to get her mind healthy again. Um, Maybe this is just like a result of where we live, just because the Pacific Northwest tends to be a little bit more like, I guess, progressive, liberal, whatever you want to call it. But I feel like for the most part, people are supportive, like in the communities that I've grown up in.
I do
I think,
feel that there is just a little, like, not really strong stigma, but a little bit of stigma to like attending counseling, feeling like it's kind of it's like a world kind of secular answer to like depression, whereas like they're within church, like that as long as you pray and like and trusting God, that's kind of a better avenue to take. So I do know that that kind of world, like the stigma does exist, and I have felt it at times. I don't think it's very strong in the churches that we've grown up in, maybe, but I do acknowledge that it is there.
yeah. So like, I haven't experienced that, just because I think like the people we know, just it's like not a big deal to them. But yeah. Also, I think there is sort of this general idea about Christianity that like if you come forward and you say I'm sad, they'll say like, buck up, Jesus saved you, and you're just supposed to like, okay. But yeah, I think like, yeah, thumbs up. The people we know, I think, have been pretty supportive, but it is not talked about either. So it could be that the people that I went to church with growing up could have had that view of mental health issues, and we just would have never known because it never came up.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point to bring up about like even though we live in like maybe in a more like progressive era or like in more recent times, it's becoming less stigmatized. But there definitely is still like with counseling, like I can feel like it's less awkward to say, oh, I have a doctor's appointment than to say, oh, I have a counseling appointment. Like there's still, I think, where we live, like still a little like it's not the norm for sure. But yeah.
Do you think that to kind of talk about this stigma that exists, do you think that there is I don't know how to phrase the question, like anything wrong with going to counseling, or like if is what am I trying to say here? I don't even know. Is it like because the stigma exists that like if you go to counseling, it's kind of like a secular viewpoint. I'm just wondering like what your thoughts are on that, because most of the time if you do go to counseling, they'll try to talk you through things that doesn't involve like God in it. But I think as Christians we understand that we need to have that perspective of who we are, like acknowledge like just even our value and our worth that comes from being like children of God and having that place in his family. And that's like a really important part of our identity, and that probably plays into mental health in ways. And I don't know if maybe a counselor might not be able to address something like that. So do you think that what do you think about the whole like should you go to counseling, or it's like there's a dangers in going outside of the church and not having the church perspective? What do you think?
Yeah, I actually went to like counseling when I was like a senior in high school, and like the lady there like wasn't a Christian, and like obviously like I think now like I would prefer someone who is a Christian, but I still feel like I learned like really helpful like techniques to like process like emotions and thoughts and everything. And I think like recognizing that the purpose of counseling like isn't to like solve a problem. It's just to have like kind of like that outside voice be like like someone who's just like almost speaking like common sense and giving you that outside perspective and giving like healthy coping techniques. I think it can be like a really helpful tool in like our spiritual walks. I guess with any good thing, it could like potentially become an idol, or like you depend more on your counselor than what God says. But I think overall, like it's just like any type of profession where they give like advice, like as long as you like go to the word in all things and still recognize that there's like good that can be shared even with people who don't have like a Christian background. I think it's still like valuable in that way. That's just like speaking from my personal experience.
Maybe.
That's
Go ahead.
why, that's one of the reasons why I think it's so cool that we have Carrie on staff, like providing counseling services, because it's like still sort of like the like the scientific approach, but also like she can like share the gospel and then like sort of like protect it in a Christian way, I guess. And I think that's really cool. I don't know if like we can strictly say like Christian counseling is better than secular counseling, but I think it is like really cool that she can like merge those two things and kind of present the help in a way that might be better for Christians who are struggling with this.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's a maybe sign that just we need to get more information out there about general like mental health, right? Because it shows that within church or just maybe in population in general, it's people don't know enough about mental health to be that kind of person. Because if for everyone, and we know that like mental health cases just worldwide are going up dramatically, and so if everyone is only able to kind of talk to a counselor and get help from a counselor, it becomes, I feel like it's not sustainable if you don't just start to teach people just in general, like how to be there for others and how to help to counsel others, how to deal with mental health. I feel like that would be maybe a stepping stone, something that we could do better in the future, just teaching us so that way we can go to each other for help. And not to say that like going to professionals is bad, but just that like there be more opportunities for people to like help out each other without having to need to go to a professional counselor or something like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think just like obviously not everyone is meant to be like a therapist or mental health professional, but just being like more aware, like doing our own research and those things. And we like all three of us kind of mentioned like not being super familiar with like that intersection of like faith and mental health. So I think just like being more aware, or like even recognizing that there's like some areas we're like ignorant in, but knowing that they're like resources, whether it be like the Bible or like mental health like services. I think that's like an important step in kind of overcoming those barriers and like providing not a solution, but more of a way for us to like face those problems head on.
If you guys don't mind me changing gears just a little bit, so obviously mental health is not like you take the pill and you're cured. It's something that you have to battle through for a long time. And for a lot of the people that I know who have, Christians that I know who have battled with mental health, it like, I think really affects their relationship with Jesus. Like it can make it hard to read the Bible. It makes it hard to pray. All of these things, like how have you personally Shekinah been able to like get through those battles and also maybe help other people when they're dealing with those types of things?
Yeah, I think that year or like few months I did like counseling in my senior year of high school was like pretty helpful, like in kind of like learning like basic like techniques of like thoughts and how to process things. Obviously, like as a psych major and just like doing research on my own is kind of helped me understand more about the process of like understanding other people, even if I haven't personally gone through what they've experienced. I think like obviously, yeah, a lot of prayer and like knowing who God made us to be and that he like will redeem our physical bodies and our mental states is really helpful. But for coping mechanisms or not coping mechanisms, but like realizing like the importance of mental health, I think just like remembering that we do like have the mind of Christ and that he is constantly working in us, and that's not just like our spiritual walk, like he like is constantly like working to redeem us and restore us to that original garden state, I guess. But, yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jason, because I find it hard when I'm in a position to like help to counsel someone, and I don't exactly know the kind of words to say or like how to help out, I guess.
It's hard because we want to. I think all three of us really do believe that like a really strong relationship with Jesus will help you like work through these things and like heal. And so it's hard to look at friends of ours who are dealing with mental health issues, but then they're also like not reading their Bible. And so for us, like, I want to look at that and say like, maybe reading the Bible won't like completely cure your mental health issue, but I think that it'll help put you in a really like a much better position to be able to handle this. And so I think, yeah, it's really hard to know how to like wisely motivate someone to continue to invest or maybe even invest more in their relationship with Jesus while they're dealing with this other thing that demotivates them a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up. And even on like the flip side of that, like if someone is actively choosing like not to take care of their mental health or prioritize it, and like that's like hurting their walk with God, like they're not able to like be engaged in community or like have like the motivation to be involved in those things. I think it could also work on the flip side where it's like, hey, like God values your mental health too, and so that's something you need to address, even if it's not like a spiritual thing. They're like both, like you were saying, like still very interconnected, and they're both like very important to take into consideration.
I'm wondering, and this is just coming from like the kind of more scientist side of me, but do you think that it's biologically based or a lot more environmental factors that's leading to the mental health rise that we're seeing? Because we're obviously seeing way more, perhaps it's being diagnosed more, but I think also there are just more people having mental health issues like within the past years. And I'm wondering if it's like, if it's whether it's a biological thing or if there's some kind of environmental, some kind of the society we're in, like lends itself to people having more mental health issues, or if it's just, or if it's even a spiritual thing. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I feel like I've been saying this to all your questions. Like it's just like a mix of everything. But yeah, I think it can like, I like how you mentioned like spiritual influences too, because there is like spiritual warfare that like the enemy can use to like distract us in our walk. So that's like always super important to be on the lookout for. But yeah, it's like I think you mentioned earlier too, Stephen, just like a growing number of cases of mental health cases. I'm also wondering too if that's like just because like we're becoming more aware of it too. But yeah, there's definitely like I would say like biological, like genetic influences too, because like ever since the fall, like obviously we still are broken in like multiple ways, not just spiritually, but mentally and emotionally. I think yeah, anything from like hormone imbalances to like neural pathways in the brain. I'm just throwing out big words to sound smart, guys, but
Go on me.
but yeah, just all I think yeah, biologically like environmental influences can have a pretty big impact on like our spiritual walk. Like it's all interconnected, I'd say.
The other day, Steve and I were talking about like social media and how big a part of this that is. One, just because like there's a lot of garbage on the internet that will bring you down. If you're just looking at just like really negative things all day, like it's gonna have an impact. But also, yeah, kind of like we were saying, like I think that it's interesting, but the increased awareness about mental health, I think, probably has resulted in more diagnoses, right? And so I think it's interesting how social media like plays into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I like what you said about the spiritual health too. It makes me think that you know, we know that Satan is like very crafty in the way that he attacks us and just like tries to hit us in the ways that are hardest for us to handle. And it seems like perhaps with the way society is now, because of the environmental factors, people are more like susceptible to that kind of attack, and he's using that effectively because we don't really know how to deal with it, to kind of get at our faith and make us doubt things that we know to be true about God. And so yeah, it very much could be just Satan like planning his attacks carefully. And so I guess we have to be more on watch about that.
Yeah, I think it is like a bit scary too, like knowing that he'll can use like normal modern everyday things to infiltrate our walks. And yeah, like even with social media too, I think that is like obviously a really big factor in like our generation. Definitely has like good and bad consequences on our mental health. But yeah, I think just being more aware of like how things can impact us and being still like cautious about how much time we spend on our phones. I feel like a hypocrite saying all that because my screen hit double digits anyways, but
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
The spiritual warfare side, I think, is really underappreciated is not the right word, but I feel like whenever we talk about like, oh, like this is the work of Satan, people kind of brush it off as like, oh yeah, Satan's in charge of the evil things. And I think it's a very real threat that we actually don't acknowledge enough. I think I think that Stephen and I, not gonna speak for you, Shekinah, even though you already mentioned it, but like we both heavily
But you're gonna speak for me?
yeah, I will actually. I think we both like pretty heavily believe in like spiritual warfare, like Satan's direct involvement in your life, even like things like demons. Steven's told me stories of like, just like things that he's heard about demons and casting out demons, other countries, all this kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's like taken seriously, I guess, by the rest of the community. And I don't know if that might also play into I guess the way that we underestimate like the importance of mental health is partially by not understanding that like it could also be the work of Satan and that it's a very real like threat to us, I guess.
It feels interesting because the like maybe we don't talk about it as much because it just doesn't seem normal. It's definitely more in like the supernatural world, and so it's hard to pinpoint, hard to say what exactly is going on. But we do know that that we are fighting spiritual warfare. We're fighting a battle with our minds, with our souls, and God is helping us all the way. But like Satan is also very crafty in the way that he attacks us. So it's something maybe that we could kind of focus more on or just at least be more aware of.
Yeah. I think like it's really easy to distance ourselves from like it's easy to like read New Testament stories and be like, oh, like demon possession and like those people had those problems, but now we're like, oh, that doesn't really happen today. So like we're still like safe. Like we don't have to like be like, oh, am I like possessed by a demon? Like, oh no, like what's gonna happen? But I think it's just important to recognize that like Satan still can work in those things. And like you guys said, like how mental health definitely can play a role in that. And it's almost easy to like minimize it to like, oh, it's all in your head, which like duh, like mental health is in your head. Like if your foot is hurting, like, it doesn't help. But yeah, I think those are really good points to bring up.
As we're talking about, I guess we can't treat mental health the same way that we treat physical health, but in some ways, we can. And so, like, in terms of dealing with it, we want to, acknowledge what it is. We want to find the issue and then work with someone to eventually, come out of it. That's what we want to see in the end. But before that, there's also the side of like preventative measures to take to, to not get into it in the first place. Do you think that's something that is possible with mental health, to kind of take measures like preventatively to not be so susceptible to it? Because I mean, like physical health, we would say like, oh yeah, you can do certain things to like be aware and to be more cautious, and so you don't hurt yourself physically in this way. Is there a similar thing for that with mental health, or is it just like, oh, we have to deal with it as it comes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like still with physical health, there's some things that are more like unavoidable with mental health because of like how our brains are structured. But I think there are like helpful like cognitive practices that you can still use to kind of like train your brain to like think the right thoughts and to redirect our energies. So there's definitely like healthy ways we can choose.
Do you have maybe an example of that?
Yeah, I was there's another a book I like read a few chapters of, meaning I didn't finish it. but but basically it's called The God-Shaped Brain, and it's written by like a Christian psychologist who's basically like the premise of the book like is how like how we think about God kind of affects like what we actually like believe about him and believe about ourselves. So like learning to embrace like those negative emotions while not, you know, like letting them overtake you, and learning like not to fear God, like not obviously like we should fear God, but not have like this like, oh, he's out to get me kind of mindset, I think is like very important. But yeah, I think there in that way, I guess there's like preventative measures for mental health. Just
So
like,
kind of just like reiterating those truths to yourself again.
yeah. I think yeah, there can be a mix of like I get the secular, spiritual like processes to go through with that, but I think yeah.
Shekinah, what is the one thing that you want everyone to know?
The one thing about just mental health in general.
Yeah, I guess just like I don't know, just knowledge that you hold very dear that you like wish that everyone knew.
Ooh, way to put me on the spot. Man, I think we really do have to just bring it back to God and like realize like him, like the importance of all aspects of our lives that he's involved with. Like he's not just involved with our spiritual walks. I think recognizing that he truly does care about every aspect of our lives is like the most like holistic way to address that, and being aware that God is involved in those things can make fighting those battles a little less scary, and recognizing that he will redeem every broken aspect of ourselves, of our mental health. Like it always like goes back to who we are in him. And obviously like those problems won't get solved in this lifetime, but not just recognizing those things about God is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was a good answer.
that was a good answer. It's interesting, like it's not brought up in the Bible specifically. It feels like not as much as some other things, but I think it is something that we do have to deal with a lot more now, and perhaps things that were written to talk about. Oh, there are like there are things that you have to put off, that you have to die to with your old self. And die to this world, but then also things that you have to continually like work towards like getting rid of. When it talks in the Bible and bringing up what we've been talking about in our Bible study recently, in like Colossians, it talks about like, oh, even though you once were slaves to this world, and then like you died, and now you're like a new person in Christ, and because of that, you should get rid of these things like anger, hate, malice, things like that. But I think on top of that, we can add to the list, like there are things that we actively have to try to get rid of, or try to like put off, which is these maybe the dark thoughts that we get trapped in, the things that will bring us down, that will make us doubt things about God. And those are some things that are issues more nowadays, that maybe wasn't as big of an issue when Paul wrote about it, but we have to be just as careful with those things, to be active, I think, in trying to trying to put those off, to trying to not ignore it, but like to combat it, I think. And it's really important to also like just give that person the sense that they are able to fight, like they have power, and like God has given them power in order to do these things, like to empower them and say that you are strong and you're able to do this. And like it might take a long time, it might not be as immediate, it might not have the results that you might want so quickly, but that you do still have the power, and that we're all like working on this, like each of us have our own problems that we're working through. And like if it's like for mental health, you might be working through that too, but we're all working through like something in our life that is not right, not perfect, and it's not going to be perfect until we get to heaven. So like keep on going at it, like keep persevering. And I think that's like a really important point to give to people.
And I love how Shekinah like continues to link these answers back to the gospel, because I think that is the important part. Like when we see brokenness like this, I think it should point us back to the gospel, because like as we've said before, like when we look at the world and how much like trouble and just brokenness, like you can't put any stock in this. And I think when we encounter these types of issues, it should point us to Jesus to say, look, there's something better. Like Shekinah keeps saying, like this will be redeemed. This is like there's so much better in the future, and it sucks now, but like if you put your faith in Jesus, if you repent, if you believe, like there's so much better like in the future, you know.
Yeah, and I think like to that, the fact that we care about others and we care about their mental health to like come out of this shows that we recognize that this is something that is not normal. That this is like something that has gone, I guess, like cause a person to think differently. You know, it's like not necessarily the right way to be thinking. And I think just that recognition that there is something wrong, that there's like something wrong in the world, like does point, like you were saying, Jason, point back to Jesus, you know, point back to God, and shows that the world is not perfect and that everything is sinful, everything is kind of messed up here on the earth. And it should point even a non-believer kind of recognizing that there's something wrong in the world. It should point them to say, oh, why is there like wrong in the world? What's going on? And perhaps that there is a path that leads to God, to see that I recognize that there is wrong, and that because of that there must be some right. What am I pursuing? What's my goal in life? You know, all these big questions. You know, when we stop to think about it on a deeper level, it does lend us to thinking about, like, is there God? What is He saying for our life? Why is there evil? And then hopefully from all of this kind of thought, we get to the gospel. You know, when we understand that there is evil in the world, we should come to the conclusion that there is good. Who is the good? And it can't be any one of us humans, right? Because all of us are evil. It has to be God, and there has to be someone who dictates, you know, right and wrong in the world. And then when you believe that, what does God say for us? Like what is there for us as humans? How do we respond to that? And, you know, God has provided a way for us to be saved, to redeem us from our sins, and it's through Jesus Christ. And I think, you know, it's like, so everything, like all of the issues that we talk about, not just mental health, but everything that we've talked about in this podcast, you know, ought to lead to that conclusion. That should lead to Jesus, his death for all of our sins to redeem us, and his resurrection, that we can be resurrected in the end as well. And, you know, holding on to that hope, holding on to that, and like using that to kind of persevere through life. It's long, and it's kind of annoying, hard at a lot of times, you know, to do these things, to keep on persevering when we see like all the trouble in the world around us. We find it hard to read our Bibles because it's like, okay, well, it doesn't feel like anything's happening right now. Sometimes it's hard to pray because it doesn't feel like anything's happening right now. But, you know, holding on to the long con, right?
Amen.
Yeah, dang. Good job, Steve.
I'm really glad to have this discussion about it, because it's something that we need to bring up. And honestly, it's not something that I probably would have thought about talking about with just Jason, because I feel like we don't really have the expertise. So thanks for like talking about it, Shekinah.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me, guys. And I think, yeah, it's a fun topic to discuss with you guys too, like something that we usually don't talk about in Christian spaces.
Yeah, is there anything, any last thing that you want to say before we kind of close this up?
Actually, yeah, one more thing. I was gonna say earlier, but something you said reminded me of it, like how God can like redeem like all aspects. And I think like us, like being like Asian American too, can definitely like have an effect in how we view mental health, or at least like with how like typically like Eastern cultures like view it versus Western culture. So I think just, yeah, recognizing, like you said, Stephen, like God will eventually like bring all those things, like it's all connected together, and realizing that like our culture, our faith, and how we perceive the importance of mental health and emotions. I think, yeah, I think it'll be like really beautiful to see like in heaven when all those things like are like as God intended them. But yeah, that was it.
Jason, any closing thoughts?
I got nothing. My brain's so empty.
All right. Yeah, it was really good to talk about it, and yeah, to just recognize all the different aspects, all the moving parts that contribute to this, and how much that we need to focus on. And I think going into the future, it will be a challenge that the church has to address more and more. And it's important. I think we're in a good time right now to kind of bring up this issue, to raise awareness about this issue, because we're gonna have to deal with it, and we're gonna have to start to educate people and find ways to help those who are dealing with mental health. So it was a really good discussion. Like all of our discussions, it's really good. So what can I say? You gotta subscribe. You gotta leave a comment and like and all those things. Okay, I hate doing the cheesy outro. So I'm just gonna say leave comments and fill out the form if you want to come guest, and you can be like Shekinah and talk about amazing topics that we wouldn't have thought about. Yeah. So if you want more of us, we'll be back, every week, maybe every other week. It seems like it's a less frequent schedule now. Yeah, now that things are starting to kick back up, school starting back up again and things like that. But we'll be here as long as we have things to talk about. So we'll catch you whenever we're here next time. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for watching.